Today, my presentation, I thought about what would be a nice topic to talk about. I try to take you on a journey with me as our customers of implementing event-driven architecture, and I'll describe why it is important to have EDA implemented and to have an evolving architecture. And also I will share with all the experience we made, at least the key experiences. So I guess I hope you can see my screen and slides and how I navigate between. So let's take you on the journey. Every journey starts with a vision. Actually, that's, I think, a dream. Typically, yeah, the strategy and vision somehow evolves on the way, and this was also how it happened for eventing for SAP. So as Sean already shared, we are working quite some time together, and from my understanding, we started not with a vision or that eventing was a big theme at SAP at this point in time, but rather back then this was IoT and these kind of topics, which emerged somehow that SAP and also other companies dig deeper into event-driven architecture or IoT messaging as it was named back then. So I will pick you up with the vision. Why I do start with the vision? I mean, it's essential that you understand what is the plan of SAP, not only for SAP and I think especially also for our customers, but in the same time, I think and believe that the strategy is almost the same for all of the companies around the world, around the globe. I mean, the industry, the streams we have within the world emerge that all of the companies become more and more digitized. I think this is clear. And we call this somehow in conjunction with all the other streams we have or we face, like intelligence, that we become smarter and smarter as companies with more automatisms and so on. We call this intelligent enterprise. You might name it differently for your company, but I think this will happen also for you, or you have a similar vision for your company. And typically, and that's at least our definition, we see everything starts with the core processes. And we name them at SAP the 4 core processes: recruit to retire. So this is all about HR end-to-end processes, meaning you hire an employee, you hopefully don't fire him, but this can also, of course, happen. And sometimes he goes on in retirement, and everything in between is somehow covered by this HR-related end-to-end process. So this is the first one. The second one is all about customer experience. So meaning how you want to attract your customers from the beginning with marketing and so on to the final selling to the customers, to your customers, and that they pay, of course, what you sold to them, hopefully. And the third core process is all about supply chain, end-to-end processes. So you, for instance, for production, you order material, and of course, finally you pay this, and everything in between, like just-in-time deliveries and so on, is somehow part of this process. And finally, and for most of the companies, of course, the most important one is design to operate. This covers your production process at the end. So when you ideate your first, or you you file down the first idea of your product till finally that you produce it, you create your bill of material, and finally you operate it or need to maintain it for your customers. And all of these processes, so the goal and the vision of SAP is to have all of these processes completely digitized and that they run frictionless. Frictionless means there is no disruption, there is no media break, but everything runs smoothly, actually across systems. But that's a challenge. We come to it later on. Attached to these processes, of course, these are standard processes which are covered either by SAP systems or by something else, of course. But you wanna, as customers, you definitely have three major requirements. You wanna extend it, you wanna be able to integrate it with third party. Of course, not everything is SAP and not everything can be covered by SAP. So for instance, you wanna schedule transportation management systems or something like this. Of course, you want to have integration, and not everything is seamless integrated. And you want to have data to value, which is all about analytics, smartness, bringing in, and these additional value services and these requirements need to be covered in addition to these core processes, of course, in a frictionless, well-integrated way, so that it's not disruptive for the whole process. Why do I tell this to you? Of course, that's a vision, and there are a couple of challenges in between of realizing or materializing this vision into reality. Let's dive a bit deeper into this. So what are the key challenges? We just brought together some figures to explain to you or to give you some hints where I'm heading to. So mainly we recognize in the market, but also in our discussions with customers, that their system landscapes become more and more complicated with different paces of innovation, with complexity, with media breaks, with disruptions, and so on. And as I said, the goal, the vision is somehow different, right? We want to have frictionless, fully digitized processes. But on the other hand, the landscapes become complex and more complex, and more applications come to it. On-premise deployed, cloud deployed, wherever. So as said, this is one of the major challenges. And this is what we will be also focusing in this slide on. So IT landscapes become more and more complex, but on the other hand, you have a lot of pressure from your competition. So young companies which do not have legacy, but innovate the processes much faster than you do. And somehow you need to be able to cope with this and innovate also faster. So there is, on the one hand, things become more complex or are more complex, and you have technical debt and as said, multiple systems you need to maintain and these kind of things. On the other hand, there is lots of pressure from the market and from your competition. Third, of course, there's a big company. On the one hand side, data is of course a value, but this data grows. So we notice that the data which is available for our customers and which is produced by their IT systems is huge, and it becomes more and more complex to deal with it and to cope with it. and actually to get a return on investment for this huge amount of data you gather and the storage you need and these kind of things and the analytics engines you need. And I think that's at least our perception. Now reality meets somehow vision. The question for most of our customers, for us, and I guess also for you, is how do I now deal with this, on the one hand, the pressure from the market, and secondly, the complex IT landscape I have. And our experience is that we need evolutionary architectures. And there are a couple of books about it. And there, of course, event-driven architecture, it's more or less the presentation, that our experience is event-driven architecture is one of the key levers to solve it. Because you can loosely couple or decouple, loosely couple and decouple all the systems and your whole, on the one hand, systems of innovations with the systems of records. That's how we give a time feeling to the systems, to the notion of systems, that you can decouple these different paces by using event-driven architecture. And there are way more dimensions where you can, what you achieve with using event-driven architecture and applying the principles and paradigms to your architecture. So, and in addition, of course, you can also always plug in things like analytics to it whenever you need it, because it's more or less that you can plug and play all value services and subscribe to the events you need just by attaching to it. So on this journey, so we believe that evolutionary architecture is achieved with one big measure to drive it is event-driven architecture. In the same time, I want to share some experiences we made, some discussions we made, and I guess you're facing the same on your end. The key discussions we are facing each and every time within our labs, within our engineerings, and with our customers actually too. So one of the main and the first discussion I wanna somehow highlight is APIs versus events. And I heard that also Sean talked about APIs and events today in the morning. So we are talking here about synchronous direct request reply calls versus asynchronous undirected pub/sub messages. There are both opinions, and there are lots of proponents on both ends at SAP, all somehow in the extreme. And I personally believe that, as usual, first of all, it depends what you need, and secondly, you need to find the right balance, and typically it's a good combination of using APIs and events. There are use cases where you need to have a synchronous response, and there are use cases, especially when you need to scale and you have multiple systems closely connected or which need to be scheduled in a process or so, that there is no way to avoid events. It's just a must. Otherwise, you will run into bottlenecks, you will run into scaling issues and so on. And typically, we use at SAP a combination of both, even using some of the patterns which are triggered with events, and then you use APIs to read additional data. So I will come to this on the next slide. Actually, that our challenge we face in our discussions, also including our customers, and there are really completely different opinions also on customer side. So I know, for instance, one high-tech company from the US, so there are only a few left. They have clear guidance, with stating no events with payload. No way. All needs to be notification based. And there are reasons for this. So we started with notifications only as well, for various reasons. And one of the main reason is the question, how do you deal with sensitive data when you send events with payload? There was nothing we could somehow, no lever to deal with it, except that you only send events with non-sensitive data. In the meanwhile, we experienced and evolved our strategy and our conceptual work in a way that we can deal with sensitive data as well. There are DPP concepts, data privacy concepts, which deliver, in addition to emitting the event, you also emit the purpose of this event. And with the purpose, you can directly say, okay, this is, you can hide data from the payload and so on, all done more or less generically. And it's a quite complex thing, I would say, but we find on the way we evolve our strategy to deal with events with payload. And yeah, just to wrap it up again, sometimes notifications are just sufficient, and there are patterns where you can use notifications in combination with APIs, and they are the better choice. Sometimes when it's more of, hey, I want to share data in a bigger round to multiple, so I want to connect the data lake and these kind of things. And often I need payload to execute a proper follow-up process, like a workflow or so. I need to know, for example, the employee ID, which is related to, I don't know, the purchase or the leave or whatever, in order to do it efficiently. So again, it depends. The third thing is a very popular one, I would say. You find it each and everywhere in the community. There are heavy discussions about queue versus log, or typically between traditional brokers and Kafka, for instance. Yeah, we had also quite some discussions at SAP. And from my understanding, again, here also the answer is it depends. Actually, we are using both, and we are trying to combine it somehow. So to use queues wherever you need more private inbox for the one or other consumer, and to use a log in case where you want to share data in a bigger round. And yeah, it's more about these kind of criteria, and of course there are multiple dimensions to it. So I'm just trying to list some examples. So and of course it's also highly depending on how much trust you have into the consumer. Is it an internal application or a set of multi-tenant applications which you have under control under the hood of SAP or as part of the SAP family, or whether this can be any consumer where you need to be careful in terms of what kind of data you share and so on. So, but at the end, we found a very complementary implementation of using both. And again, both has its weakness and strength. And we try to find and bring major and try to focus mainly on the strength, of course. Finally, I would argue that most in the round here in the audience would raise their hand about freedom is my choice. I would do the same if I wouldn't know what I'm talking about. So of course, when we talk about standards, there are multiple levels of standards. On a pure protocol level, like messaging protocols like AMQP or MQTT, there are APIs which are standardized like JMS for Java, and on a higher level, there are quite some standards be pushed, or de facto standards being pushed currently by the community, for instance, in the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, CNCF, where we are also contributing. Cloud events, for instance, which is more about the envelope of a message of an event, or async API to describe the payload and the structure and yeah, the event during design time and so on. And even if we go up one level, then we talk about governance. So nothing covered by open source standards or ISO standards, but rather an agreement within the company how you want to deal, how you want to specify certain events. And that's super important for us. Why? Because we want to run dynamic processes and actually connect multiple systems with each other. If it's not clear, for instance, that the sales order of the one system is the same as of the other system, like really different products in this end-to-end processes I described, and even cross end-to-end processes, there needs to be an agreement, a contract between the applications that they know what we are talking about, meaning if there is a sales order, that this has this structure and they can use these and these fields to execute certain processes. So there needs to be a semantic on top, which is super important for us as a vendor, definitely, but also for our partners, being able to build on top of this layer applications which do not need to deal with different kind of data structures for the same object, for instance. And I hope these were the 4 words. I hope I'm still in time, almost, I would say. With that, I'd like to conclude my presentation, and thanks for attending, opening up for questions.